You're probably wondering what you just stumbled on, but don't click off just yet. You're going to want to dive into this. Because what follows is a panel discussion on the music industry's most critical issue right now, artificial intelligence. AI-generated music is projected to be worth $64 billion by 2028. It's shaking up the industry in unprecedented ways, sparking urgent questions about licensing, transparency, creativity, and what it means to be an artist today. To unpack all of this, we brought together senior VPs from leading music tech companies, Forbes 30 under 30 AI entrepreneurs, and acclaimed recording artists to explore the debate from every single angle. This is a thought-provoking conversation at a true breaking point for the industry. So stick around, because you're not going to want to miss it. So hello everyone. Thank you very much for giving us your time today, and welcome to this panel titled Music at the Breaking Point, AI, Creative Rights and Human Expression. We're really excited to be able to host this discussion, such an important discussion, such a timely one, in a moment when generative AI is reshaping music in such profound ways. Effectively, the aim of this discussion is going to be to kind of dive into some of the cruxes of the AI and music debate, be it licensing, transparency, human artistry, creativity, and revenue generation, and things like that. From a variety of perspectives, kindly shared with us with the panelists that we have today. My name's Ben. I'm a marketing associate at MatchTune. Just really quickly, for anyone who doesn't know what MatchTune does, we provide AI-powered technology to help music rights holders safeguard their copyright against deep fakes and modified audio and online music copyright infringement. And we also help digital brands and corporations ensure compliance when licensing music for their video content. So in terms of how today's session is going to run, I think we'll probably have about 30 to 45 minutes of discussion with our panelists, with some questions that I'd like to ask them. And then towards the end, we'll have a lot of time for an audience Q&A. So if you guys have any questions that pop up during the course of the discussion, then feel free to just pop a question in the chat. And if there's a specific panelist that you'd like to ask the question to, just pop their name as well. And we'll either get to it at the end, or if I manage to catch it during the discussion and in the appropriate moment, then I'll bring it up then too. I think that's most of the house rules. I should mention this is the first time that we've ever hosted a panel here at MatchTune. Obviously, we've been lucky enough to attend lots of industry events and webinars, but this is the first time that we've hosted something ourselves. So we're really excited to be able to host it for such an important discussion. And forgive us for any growing pains that might arise throughout the session, although I'm sure it's going to be a very, very smooth discussion. So I think a good place to kick things off is for each of our panelists just to give a quick introduction, who they are, what they do, and the perspective they're going to be bringing today, I suppose in the order in which I can see you. So starting with yourself, Mansoor, and then Paul, and then yourself, Ebubé.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks a lot, Ben, for having me on this panel. I'm really, really glad to be a part of such an esteemed group of people. My quick background, I am the co-founder and CEO of a company called Beatoven.ai. We are a foundation model company. We work in building models for generating music that are trained on 100% licensed content. So we work with artists, rights holders, and we source all of this content to be able to then train our models to then be able to generate music for our end consumers and enterprises who are the users of our product. A little bit on my background. I'm a professional musician myself. I've been in the music industry as an artist. I'm a classically trained sitar player, and my family's been in music for 7 generations. I've been in music technology for the last 20 years in various capacities. So yeah.
Thank you. I'm Paul McCabe. I work for Roland Corporation, Japan, based near Los Angeles, and I lead a research and development group called Roland Future Design Lab. And my team, which is a distributed team in many different regions of the world, we're focused on advanced technologies and the opportunities and the risks that advanced technologies might present to music creation. I also serve on the executive board of the MIDI Association for anybody who wants to drop to that level of ones and zeros. And our focus right now is pretty intensely on spreading the word around MIDI 2.0, the next iteration of a almost 45-year-old protocol. And I think most relevant for this discussion, I'm a co-author along with colleagues at Universal Music Group on the Principles for Music Creation with AI, which is the centerpiece of an initiative called AI for Music. I've been doing this for a long time. I've been in music technology for 40 years, 34 years and counting with Roland, and I'm just really pleased to be here with these great colleagues on the panel.
Thank you. My name is Ebubé. I'm an R&B artist and producer as well. Formerly based in London, but now I've just recently moved out to Brussels in Belgium. So it's been a lot of change recently. I was part of an R&B group called No Guidance in London for about 3.5 years, just after I left school. So there was that experience, but I was classically trained. I was in boarding school since young and played the piano, violin from the age of about 3. So that was kind of my background in choral and classical music, and then into jazz and soul, which led me into R&B now, and still practicing piano whenever I can. But yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much, guys. And just to say it again, we're really grateful to have all three of you here. Such an eclectic kind of panel, and I'm really looking forward to getting like such kind of diverse opinions and perspectives on the topic. So I think let's just kick things right off. Paul, I wanted to start with yourself. Obviously, this discussion centers around a breaking point that we have in the industry as it pertains to AI right now. And when you look at some of the stats and some of the industry discourse around AI in music, it can certainly feel that way. And I was wondering, from the vantage point that you have with AI for music and also Roland, it would be great to get an idea of just the landscape in your view. You know, what are the threats that kind of define this breaking point right now?
Yeah, of course, that's the fundamental question. And from my perspective, at the highest level, I think the massive investment across industries and around the world in what is commonly called unaligned AI, specifically artificial intelligence and related applications that don't, by their nature, serve to protect humanity, and in our case, human creativity, not just the output or the intellectual property generated by human creativity, but the process of human creativity as well. And I think for me, what's alarming, I mean, first of all, we have to recognize that AI is what is commonly called a general purpose disruptive technology, which, you know, different from other technologies that I've experienced in my lifetime, is in the process of touching everything and impacting everything in some way, shape, or form. And knowing that it's doing that, and it's doing that in the world of music creation and music consumption as well, where some of the primary innovators in this technology realm don't seem to have a priority on aligning around the protection of humanity and human creativity in our case, is deeply concerning.
Yeah, and I suppose that kind of directly relates to, as you were talking there, about how some companies within the space choose to build either responsibly and ethically, or with less responsibility. And Mansoor, one of the things that I obviously love about Beatoven.ai is that it's a service that obviously implements licensing, that pays creators fairly. I read that you guys are a team of musicians. You know, first and foremost, obviously, I know you said that you are yourself. That's a parallel that I draw with our team at MatchTune. I think it's a really great thing because it gives you a vested interest in making sure that you do things carefully. So I was wondering kind of why you felt that it was important to build with that principle in mind, especially as early as 2021 and before that, as you guys were developing the platform, and how you handle the challenge of competitors that don't build with that principle in mind.
It's a great question, and I really resonate with what Paul just said. Like, it is alarming to see the kind of investment that is going in unaligned AI. And I really don't understand the intent of why that's happening. But at the same time, to answer your question, I think for us, it was pretty straightforward to do the right thing. Like, it didn't even cross our mind that we would ever go and like just take content off the internet and build something. It wasn't something. Maybe it's obvious to a lot of people, but it's not obvious to us. Like, for us, it was the obvious thing is actually to ask for permission. You ask for opt-in, you ask for consent of artists, and back then in 2021, it was so new as a concept that artists were also kind of um, very fearful of this technology, but at the same time they are willing to contribute to this technology if they see the dollars in it. So we saw that, and when we raised our initial round of funding, we actually had a separate budget allocated just for licensing deals. So we would go to artists, we would do like a lot of this. Of course, there was a lot of convincing. We had to explain to them what we were building, how it would work, and we spent a lot of time doing that. And I think this is an industry that is built on trust, beyond anything else, and we kind of deeply respect that. And as a result of that, we saw a lot of support of the artists. And one of the most fascinating things is we always thought that artists would be against AI. In our case, our artists are actually a supportive of our company. They come out on like social media and they talk great things, and like, we worked with this platform, we loved contributing to this, and we also made money from this platform. That is what we need to build. Like, we need to build it in a way that is creating value for everyone in the ecosystem. And that's something that we deeply align with, and we are seeing compounding effects of that. Like, because we took all of those hard steps, scraping is easy, is what I would say. Convincing people and getting people to align with your vision is much harder, and we decided to take the harder route. And what we also noticed now, as we kept compounding on this, is the rights holders are beginning to trust us. So we have gotten a lot of companies who are directly coming and doing licensing deals with us, and they are providing us their content in the form of opt-ins, and that is only going to be beneficial for a company like us in the long run. And to answer your other question, how has the other side, or the other competitors who are not doing any of this, affected us? It has definitely affected us in the way that they definitely have a significant advantage, because when you're trained on literally every piece of content that was created in the history of mankind, you obviously would have outputs that are significantly superior in quality. But at the same time, um, it also challenges you from the landscape of how people view it. Like, it made the entire venture capital industry to believe that this is the only way to build, if you have to build high quality. But one of the things that happened recently was the 11 Labs deal, right? Which was, I mean, it's not the best, but it's something that it's getting started to move in a direction where people are doing licensing deals and building these things, which is, I see as a net positive for the industry.
Right. And I suppose, just building on what you said, sometimes one of the criticism, or not even criticism, but one of the things that people say about licensing is that currently it's quite difficult to implement, particularly, for example, at the output stage. Am I right in saying that currently the way that you license music is just at the ingestion stage, and it's just a payout at the ingestion stage? Or
Not
is it
really.
different to that?
It's both. So we are doing payouts at the ingestion stage, and now we are also working on payouts on the output stage. Like, how would the revenues flow from us to the rights holders through a rev share mechanism is something that we're actively working on right now.
But when you train, for example, on, let's say that you train an AI model on 600 solo piano pieces, right? And then eventually at some point it generates a solo piano piece. Is it not entirely subjective in terms of which pieces you then credit, which pieces you then remunerate? Because this is, again, like,
Yeah.
it might be an argument that people say it's so hard to kind of retroactively understand exactly where a model has like trained from to create an output.
Absolutely, and like I said, it is a very hard problem. Attribution is not easy, and we acknowledge that. But I believe that at least there needs to be some start, to start working in this direction, and over a period of time, everyone will learn and will figure out what's the best way to build the right kind of business models around this. but the intent needs to be in the right place. That's what is very important at this stage. And because if a lot of other people don't even have the intent to do this, they don't care about this, they want to fight it out in quotes, and that's the worst that can happen. So that's the way how we view it, at least at this stage.
Yeah, and you're totally right. It's better to start navigating it than not navigate it at all, purely because of its complexity, I suppose. But I suppose the frameworks that we're talking about, they play directly into kind of, how artists are central to this debate. That's a key principle behind the AI for Music initiative. So Ebubé, I wanted to get your thoughts from like a kind of creative perspective. Obviously, you're a very established artist. You navigate the industry on a daily basis right now. So when you look around, when you speak with peers and collaborators of yours, does it feel like a breaking point to you? Does it feel like background noise? What are the kind of conversations you're having on AI right now?
I think for me recently, what struck me was, I know Mansoor, you just mentioned it, the 11 Labs launch, and that for me, seeing that and seeing how AI has been moving so fast in other industries, but with music, it's kind of, there's always been a little bit of friction. And I think that's partly because a lot of my peers have been so like reticent to start, you know, being on board with it because everybody sees it as unaligned, as we said. It's not the AI that they see is we take all of your data and we just make stuff and we replace you. That's kind of like the the idea that most artists have right now. But I feel that there are use cases where it can be useful, but as with anything, as with coding, as with we're seeing with writing or any other thing that LLMs have become really useful at, you still need to have that kind of knowledge of how to operate or how to prompt the AI or how to, in order for you to be able to get some kind of result out of it. And I do feel that we need to have that in mind when we're building things. And I appreciate that both of you are at the forefront of this for music and that it is being done with that in mind, because I think as soon as you lose the creativity and as soon as AI becomes about anybody can just make anything to any level, that's where a lot of artists can't get on board. And I feel that for me, it's very important that it becomes a tool for creativity that allows people to do more things rather than a tool that kind of removes the creative aspect and becomes inhumane. Because music, this is the reason why it's not kind of gone forward and as fast as in other industries, is because it's it's a creative industry. It's something we we there's a lot of gatekeeping from an artist aspect to it has to be like this. You have to make music like this. You have to have practiced for your whole life in order for you to get to this point. There's training involved. So I feel that I wouldn't necessarily say there's a turning point. There's still quite a lot of, especially within commercial music, there's still quite a lot of, reluctance to get on board with it. Just because I feel that in the space, all we know is the LLM of AI. We don't really hear much of the music side that AI has to offer. And some of the examples that we see and some of the use cases I've seen in studios of producers using it, it doesn't speak to the fact that we still need to focus on the creativity aspect. And sometimes it can be quite scary, when you see such a big shift in your industry and somebody can make something that you spent years preparing yourself to or practicing to be able to do.
Yeah.
But I do think that is going to change, especially with more of a focus on how can we create tools that enhance your ability to create rather than replace.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And there are so many fantastic use cases for generative AI. And I also think generative AI is going to prompt a pivot and a shift in what it could mean to be creative in music. It could be a new way of creating music to be fantastic at prompting an AI to create exactly what you want, for example. And I know you mentioned as well there the kind of like collaborative use case, so less so sort of like prompt to output generation, but more just like collaboration in when it comes to things like ideation and also post-production. For context, Ebubé and myself have actually worked together in the studio a number of times in producer artist and producer capacities, and I've seen you use AI in places to produce music. For example, I remember you using it for a bass line, to just write a bass line that we then replayed and changed a little bit, and a keys run that for like the intro of a song that like gave it so much depth. And I couldn't believe that this stuff was AI generated. And for me, it was like such a fantastic use case of AI kind of like symbiotically with human creativity to create this thing. And it still felt like it spoke to both of us artistically, but it was AI generated. So my question, I suppose, is kind of like, how actually do you use AI just in a purely creative capacity right now? And do you ever envisage that, changing? Would you ever, for example, use a fully AI generated beat for your music, or would you, do you still value human input in that kind of process?
No, 100%. I definitely think that there's a balance to be had. And I think in particular where it could become useful is those that don't know how to produce and don't know how to just make a beat like that for them to be able to write a song on top of. And often there's a lot of stories of they'll go on YouTube and find a beat, and then a lot of people go and use that beat, and then they don't credit properly the person who made the beat, and that's an issue in and of itself. But it can become much more useful if we have AI tools that effectively can, for those to quickly just have something to be a base to work off, but not completely replace collaborating with somebody else, because that's the humane aspect. Currently, I use it. And there was a period when Logic released an update that had the session players. I used it like I was just in complete awe. I was like, "There's no way this is actually real." Like in Logic as well. And that's when we used it for the first time, and I used it in quite a few sessions after that, just to see how fast it's improving. I know a few producers who they create samples and old sounding samples that aren't necessarily an actual sample that they base their beat off, and there's really creative ways that they can be used, and I've seen it used in those ways. I just really like to emphasize the fact of it not going in a certain direction, which is creating what people call slop, or what people call just like content that it's not been thought out. And that's the main thing for me, because as an artist it gets, like I said, scary. When I saw the Logic update and I started using it, I was a bit scared. Like I was like, maybe I should start using Ableton more just to make myself work a little bit more. It's kind of a shock to the system. But yeah, some of the creative ways that it's been used have been amazing, and it's, only going to amplify and show people's creativity more if used and steered in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. Mansoor, I just wanted to go back to the kind of the licensing discussion that we were having at the start. And I want to kind of look at some of the reasons that, again, I think, to evaluate like the extent to which this is a breaking point. I think it's given that a lot of the arguments surrounding the breaking point debate are around things like licensing and data usage. To be able to evaluate that, I really want to look at some arguments that people make, for example, in favor of fair use, and what you think of those. And something that I hear quite a lot is that, for example, the way that an AI learns and then creates new music is exactly the same as the way that a human learns and then creates music, in the sense that it listens to all the music that exists right now, and then it creates something new. And like I say, as the founder of a Gen A and the creator of a Gen A model that does have these licensing frameworks in place, How do you discern between those two examples, and why is it kind of important? Why does that distinction matter when we talk about things like fair use and IP?
Yeah. First of all, I completely disagree that an AI learns the way humans do. That is an argument I've heard so many times, and I will always oppose it. I'll tell you for two specific reasons. The first one being, no human being has been exposed to all the music that was ever created in the world. But an AI machine is. It has looked at this. Some of the bigger models have looked at almost every piece of music content that was created historically, and that is very different from how humans learn. Humans learn from individual experiences. We go through a journey. We go through practice. We go through so many experiences, influences, and that's how our music gets shaped eventually. So that's the first thing. On the second aspect, no human can generate 100,000 songs in a minute. That is unrealistic. And an AI machine can do that. So AI scales, humans don't. So what I'm trying to imply here is, in the context of these generative models, the AI models are directly in competition with the training data that it's trained on. So, which is a very important thing to draw a line at. So if you are doing that in a sense, then you better pay for that content. And the people who are contributing this training data need to make revenues out of this equation, and that's the predominant reason why we strongly believe. We are also not anti-AI, right? So there are two sides of it doesn't have to be a binary situation that you have to abandon one industry for the success of another industry. Most of the AI companies argue this, that if we have to pay all the publishers and the rights owners, there will not be AI anymore. That's another absolutely absurd argument. So there is a middle ground, and the middle ground is licensing. That's the only way forward, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, so you just mentioned there that like the argument given is that if we have to start licensing on content, it becomes really inefficient. That almost seems to be, in terms of legislation, where we're heading as well. It seems to almost be a move towards, like, if we have to start training and getting permission and opt in and opt out for the content that for the data that we train on, then we're going to effectively like lose the AI race. It feels like that to myself. I feel like there are a lot of legislation. I think of like the UK data bill, and like where things seem to be going, at least with the US, kind of spearheaded by big tech, in which there seems to be a lot of a move towards fair use. I'm curious to in your position with Beatoven.ai, like what your perspective is on the legislation right now.
My honest question to these people is, who are we in race with? Are we in a race with ourselves, or are we in a race with other civilizations? I've always heard this argument that, China is anyway going to be doing this, right? Like, they're anyways going to be scraping content and building this, and hence the US and other countries need to do it. What you'll find funny is, I recently read an article in the China Daily News where the Chinese government arrested 4 individuals who are users of Gen AI tools for alleged copyright infringement. And it was one of the most interesting things that I saw on the internet. It was like, okay, the country that's being quoted for a massive copyright infringement. I'm not saying it's in their defense, but I'm just saying that this was an interesting counterintuitive example that I saw, because what the court in that particular case said, that the users of these Gen AI tools were able to create some art that was exactly replicating some content that's already out there, and that's why it was a case of copyright infringement. Now, I do believe, of course, there is a global race. It's like a global arms race in AI that's ongoing right now. And of course, all countries want to be the best and the most advanced in this technology. There are certain sectors you can do that, and that's totally fine. If it's pushing the net positive for the whole of humanity, yes, we should be, aggressively. But why the creative arts? Like, what are you going to be doing in competing on the creative arts front between two civilizations? And what are you pushing forward for? You're essentially like you're tramping over artists just for the sake of some sort of an hypothetical AI race. So I think that distinction needs to be drawn very clearly.
Yeah, and there are some countries that do have copyright laws that seem to be a little more in favor of creators when it comes to AI. Do you think that it hinders the space from a tech perspective when the kind of when the legislation just isn't globally cohesive at all. Does that make sense?
I think legislations also need guidance, right? Like, I mean, you cannot. I mean, some of them are protectionist, and some of them are like very aggressive in their stance. They also don't know what is right and what's wrong, and a lot of the current whatever we are seeing is being lobbied by big tech. You know, it's all the dollars. So, so I think there will be clarity. I am always an optimist inherently. I am a big believer that, you know, everything reverts to the mean, and eventually all of this will correct. This is a kind of a bubble that we are in right now. So I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that humans will do the right thing.
Yeah. Paul, I was obviously, what I was speaking about with Mansoor at the start of that there was like, you know, the argument or the comparison rather that AI makes between, that people make between AI and humans. And I wanted to ask yourself from a tech perspective about the comparisons that people make between AI and technology itself. So again, another argument I hear with the, you know, for fair use, for example, is that, you know, in the 70s, we had the birth of the synthesizer. And towards the millennium, we had the birth of the digital audio workstation. And both of these instances, there was a lot of pushback because these things kind of like, you know, removed humans further from the music creation process. Like, so I guess a lot of people would argue that AI is just another iteration. It's just another technological revolution. And I'm curious as to your thoughts. Again, Roland is a company that's obviously been at the heart of technological innovation for as long as we've had technological innovation. So I was wondering kind of like, how do you feel AI is similar to those innovations and how is it fundamentally different?
Yeah, another great question. Thank you. I do want to, because you kind of teed it up for me there, I want to wrap back around to, and I could just listen to Mansoor and Ebubé all day long. And perhaps one day, Mansoor, I'll just set that up and just let you talk to me for a while. But what I will say is foundational to this, again, is this differentiation between how AI learns and how humans learn and then create from that learning. And I would agree with everything that Mansoor said. I would add into that the absence of emotion and meaning on the AI side. And you know, when a human being, even if we could ingest everything that's been created like AI does, which of course we cannot, but if we could, before we then reinterpret that and create something new, we wrap it with emotion. Our context, our life experience gets infused into what comes next, and that's what imparts meaning on what we create. And with AI not being able to feel, there's no transference of meaning into the output. And I would argue that that's a fundamental distinction between the two as well. Now, to the question of comparing AI to other locally disruptive technologies like the DAW, synthesizer, drum machine, sampling, and whatnot, absolutely, there are some lines that you can draw of comparison, but there are some really important distinctions between them as well. First of all, and I mentioned it earlier, it is important to understand that AI is a general purpose disruptive technology that's touching everything, including the world of music creation and music consumption as well. So we live in a world that's being disrupted by AI, whereas the DAW and sampling and synthesizers were a local disruption, significant, but a local disruption. But I think more important to the question is that in the case of all of the examples of technologies that have disrupted music creation and music performance and production, there are human beings on both sides of the equation. A DAW on its own doesn't do anything. A synthesizer on its own, some would argue that that self-generating modular synthesizers might do something, but they still require somebody to create patches and set up modulation schemes and what have you before anything happens. There are human beings in control. Yes, you could argue, well, there's fewer human beings in the case of somebody that's playing a sampled orchestral library for a soundtrack to a film. There are fewer human beings than if they were using a 38 to 50 piece orchestra to play that same music. And that is true. However, I think what we've also seen post these disruptions, that we still find our way back to valuing the humanity in music, and we still want to hear that orchestral score and many of us can still distinguish, although we might not be able to articulate very specifically what the differences are, we can still recognize that there's something different between a temp score created with even the best orchestral sample libraries versus a performed score that was recorded at Abbey Road in London. But I think that's the key point, is that there are human beings on both sides of this that are in control on both sides of this and making the decisions on both sides of this. Whereas with AI, the risk, again, when we talk about unaligned application of AI, is that we relinquish control. The risk is that we relinquish control, and AI will displace wholeheartedly, completely, humans in the loop, and make decisions on our behalf as well.
Yeah, you were talking about kind of like the human element in music and how that makes it timeless, and Mansoor, you were talking about that as well. And I wanted to kind of touch on that because obviously a lot of this discussion is also around human creativity and human artistry. And I sort of had like something of an open question in terms of what we mean when we talk about human artistry and how that can be like replicated by AI, because it's something that's really piqued my curiosity lately. Obviously, when we think about like really, really kind of culturally defining music and really, really innovative songs, it's often about creative decisions that were quite lateral and almost weren't very logical in their nature. You know, so I think about like an example I always give is Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen, you know, putting an operatic section in a 7-minute song, or like in the hip hop space, like Jay Dilla, the producer, you know, in the 90s, who completely reinvented our concept of rhythm by effectively playing the drums like so off grid that it just kickstarted this new wave of rhythm that we still see in 40 to 50% of like the soul songs now. And I suppose I wanted to ask Ebubé from a creative perspective, and then perhaps Mansoor from a tech perspective. I mean, we know how powerful AI is, and we know that we're going to also see, you know, more agentic AI in future being able to act in a more kind of like individual way. Do you envisage AI ever kind of like demonstrating that kind of like non-linear creative flair? Or is that something that's like entirely human?
Ooh, I don't know.
It's such a big question.
Yeah.
That's why I thought I was saving it for this.
I think obviously, man, so you can see from a technical perspective, but from the way that I see it like progressing and the way that I see it progressing in other fields, I feel that AI, how it is now, and obviously in 10 years it's going to be completely different, but it is doing the work that you would, like Mansoor said, you'd want to scale. So in the coding, it's doing like what the junior level of coders are doing, but you still need, you know, the top level, top down look at the overall project. And like you said, in order to create a great company, I don't think AI right now or anytime soon is going to be able to completely make its own company, just one prompt, make a unicorn company, and it will completely think of a completely new idea, execute it perfectly, taking into account all of the factors that come across it. And it's the same for music. You still kind of need that person, even though it might just be one person, whereas before you might have needed a lot of great minds together. But it still kind of needs that human aspect, because in order to appeal to humans, you need a human. You can't, music still needs to appeal to the human. And for example, you know, logically, like you said, Jay Dilla's rhythm doesn't make any sense. You know, if we're looking at the count on the BPM, it's not on time, it's not supposed to sound right. You know, even very speed is not supposed to technically sound correct to the human body. It's supposed to be at 440 hertz, not down tuned. But for some reason, humans just like it, you know, for whatever reason. And like we were saying, like Paul, you were saying, it's about the emotion. I don't know why I like a very speed, but it just works, you know, on certain songs, but on certain others it doesn't, and there's no explanation for why. So for me, I don't see how it can get there, and a lot of my family members, they'll often tell me, are you not scared about AI? Because I use AI a lot in lots of different spheres, not just music. But I'm kind of like, because I know a little bit about how it's been made and how there are limitations and how I see people using it, it's not the, you know, like you said, agentic is a word, but it's not going to completely act off itself. It's still at the end of the day a computer. It's still got a goal to complete. It's not, completely AGI like they say the word that, they're trying to reach is. So I don't know. But Mansoor, you
Yeah.
could help from a technical perspective.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very cool what you said, right? And I'm in complete agreement with what you just said. I mean, like, if you look at, I mean, I think the imperfections is what makes us, human, and the music, right? Like, like, can you train an AI model on up to, let's say, 1980s music and expect it to generate music from 2000s and 2010s? I don't think so. Like, it is only as good as what it's trained on, right? And music is such a cultural phenomenon. Every 5 years, like, cultures shift, music, we hear something entirely new sounds, new creativity, new artists, and that is very unique to human beings. You can build the best agentic LLMs and agentic AI systems in the world, but what's the point of that? Like, in fact, it's just going to push us more away from the internet, in my opinion. Like, I have a contrarian belief, like, with all the stuff that's happening right now. The internet is becoming a really bad place, because it's getting flooded with so much of AI generated content in the form of videos, images, and music, and the authenticity of the internet is kind of going down. As a result of that, I believe a large portion of people might just not start seeing any more value, in the shared information space. And with agentic systems, it's going to get even worse. Imagine all of these kind of bots which are there on the streaming platforms that are, just gauging what people are listening to, and then they're generating music. Who are we building all of those kind of systems for, right? Like, I mean, the main central part of the whole equation is the artist. And I think music has always been an industry about artists, and and I don't think that is going anywhere anytime soon.
That sentence is a perfect sentiment, I think, to end the discussion. I have a million more questions and I would love to sit here for another 5 hours, but I'm slightly conscious of time. I think that it might be a good idea to pivot to the audience Q&A. Just before I do, and while I give some people some time to think of some questions, I just want to say a massive thank you from myself and everyone at MatchTune for you guys giving us your time and your insights and your perspectives today. I think 45 minutes has gone by like 5 minutes for me. It's been such a fascinating discussion. I think I've learned so many things that I didn't know an hour ago. So I'm really, really grateful to you guys. Like I say, thank you so much. Yeah, like I say, I think now would be a good moment to kind of pivot to the audience Q&A. If we have any questions, if anyone in the audience has any questions for any of the panelists, then I guess we'll just wait like a minute or two for them to come in, and then I'm sure we'll have time for maybe 4 or 5 if they come in. Okay, we have our first question. David, I presume this is for Mansoor, correct?
Sure. Do I have audio or no?
Yeah, we got you. Do you want to
Okay.
just ask it?
Sure. And I guess I didn't mean to type AI tool. I just think about efficiencies as something that AI can really help expand creativity. So I was just curious from your perspective, what are some of the top, whether it be workflow perspective or even solving some geography problems and collaborating. Just wanted to hear what you think some of the top efficiencies are in helping people be creative with AI.
Yeah. So at our company, we have multiple products in AI. So one is, of course, on the generative side, and on the other side, we have on the analysis side. So AI is helping a lot of rights holders and catalog owners and artists using our intelligence tools for generating metadata. So there's a lot of missing pieces at a lot of times in terms of genre information, mood information, high level, even the cue sheets, like, for example, if you want to know, like, okay, from the first 12 seconds, what is the intro comprising of, like, then the structure of the song, all of this information, it's quite efficient at doing that. So that is one side of the equation, which is quite helpful for a lot of catalog owners and artists. So that's on the analysis side. On the generative side, we are seeing predominantly usage of the tool for background music creation. So it's mostly like, somebody's creating a 3-minute or 2-minute video on YouTube and they need some original music in this particular style. They would come to our tool and they would like generate music, and they would just license it through a subscription fees. And it works pretty well for somebody who's creating like 4 to 6 videos in a week and who cannot afford a producer every time they're creating a video. So, that's the kind of value proposition that we are creating for these kind of users.
Ben, if I could just mention something on that as well, because I think David's question is really important, and it does set up one fundamental premise certainly from Roland's perspective, and this is in the principles for music creation. It's one of the central elements of the principles for music creation with AI, which is that there's a risk in blind innovation, and like others on this call, Roland is all in on innovating with AI and other advanced technologies to forward human music creation and enjoyment. But we're also committed to seeking the opinions of the artists. I want to know what Ebubé's tolerances are when it comes to tools that he uses in his workflows, tools that he would welcome and be willing to try, and other parts of his workflow that are precious to him. That's sacred ground. I don't want AI to incur into this space. That's uniquely me. And so the supporters of AI for music are committed to being in conversation with artists and not creating our own conclusions, drawing our own conclusions, working off of our own assumptions on what's going to be useful, helpful, and welcomed, and what may not be as well.
Absolutely. Josh also asked, given what Mansoor was just saying about a flood of AI slop overwhelming the internet, what are some solutions people see to help mitigate the problem and make sure that human creators can cut through the noise still?
I think that's a question for you guys at MatchTune. Maybe you guys.
Yeah, I suppose. When I read that question, the first thing that comes to mind for myself is that we need a lot. I feel like we need more transparency around any AI generated content, and like that starts with perhaps like labeling. I'm thinking about streaming platforms, right? Being able to understand exactly what content is AI generated, because we don't really understand right now. And that was like a problem that we had with, like, for example, the Velvet Sundown, which had everyone going crazy for like 2 weeks a month ago. And also I think being able to, that also, kind of, I suppose, leads into being able to detect AI generated content, whether that's compositions or whether that's deepfake vocals and stuff like that. And that's obviously something that we specialize in MatchTune. We provide technology to help people be able to do that. Hopefully those two things symbiotically would foster a lot more transparency. And I suppose that's what would allow a lot more visibility, and therefore a lot more visibility effectively for human creators and human creations. And as long as we can distinguish between the two, then I think that we can move forward fairly productively.
Ben, I would add to that as well. I think that there's likely going to be a combination of solutions that bring us to kind of an ultimate problem solver here on a global scale, because as you know better than I do, most, if not all, of the labeling solutions are detection-based solutions that work on the finished product. And one thing that some companies, including Roland and Universal Music Group and a few others, are thinking about is, rather than anchor the paradigm on working with the finished creative work. What opportunities avail themselves to us if we move to the very beginning of the creation process? And we're not trying to detect AI. We actually put control into the hands of the artists. And imagine a solution that lives in the context of a DAW, where in a very the workflow would have to be as friction free as possible. But imagine as artists build up compositions in a DAW, as they bring in assets, as they create assets through live recording or MIDI performances with software synthesizers or what have you, that labeling is actually happening at that stage. And that labeling is infused and then travels up the production chain. And so that rather than waiting until something is finished and then trying to detect and reverse engineer what the provenance of this thing is, what if that provenance is being built as a story that travels up the production process inside the DAW, where 98% of all music is now created? And what opportunities does that open to us as well?
That's absolutely. I never even thought about the what would happen at that stage, like you say, at the kind of like creation stage. Alvin asks, this might be the last question that we have time for, and I imagine it's going to provoke quite a long answer. But Alvin asks, what does the future of music licensing look like? I suppose in a generative AI dominated world. Obviously, Mansoor, we were talking earlier about like the complications with licensing and how this is often a deterrent. So how I suppose my question would be, just building on that, what does that look like? What does licensing look like in a Gen AI world to you?
I mean, I can talk about from the visibility that I have right now. I don't know what's going to happen in the future because there are so many things at stake right now. But at least in the present, I can say like there is licensing that's going to happen at the inputs. You have to pay a training data fees. This could be in the form of maybe like an annual fee, and then it kind of gets renewed automatically, until the time you want to keep getting new content from your license providers. So that's one aspect. There are also going to be elements of minimum guarantee. The licensors would want to see like some fixed amount of revenue coming in for the catalogs that they're licensing to Gen AI companies. So that's definitely going to be another aspect. And the third would be revenue sharing. Like based on how the model is generating revenues, a percentage of that needs to come back to the licensors. The splits of how that would happen is still an unsolved problem. It's still being worked upon, but I'm pretty confident that a lot of companies will make some progress on that front, and that is the only way, in my opinion, that this industry has to progress, or else there is no other way around it. Like at least I don't believe there is another way around it. Yeah.
Is there an issue around like royalty dilution for yourself as well? I mean, obviously, a problem. Music is already stigmatized, particularly in like streaming and commercial music. It's really stigmatized for being quite hard to earn a living from like royalty payouts alone, effectively.
It's a great question. In fact, and I think I see David's next question is like, what's overrated and what's underrated? I'm going to combine that question with my answer for this discussion. Is I feel like Gen AI is so overrated right now. People think like we have arrived on some technology where the promise, of course, there is significant revenues that's coming in for some companies, but it's still nothing in comparison to the amount of investment dollars that have gone in this. We don't even know, how big this is going to get. Everybody's just riding on some sort of an AGI hypothesis, which I am personally very much of the belief that the current AI approach is not going to take us to AGI. That is definitely not how humans think and work. It is powerful. LLM technologies are quite powerful, but it's not AGI level powerful. So I would say that's overrated. All of these kind of fluff that we've been hearing. Also at the same time, to talk a little bit about, like, I'll just touch upon David's other question, like what's overrated and underrated. Like if you think about overrated, like everybody started to believe like, code generation, you can just kind of like create like all these massive websites, fully deployable websites by just, prompting. That's not true at all. Talk to any developer. They will tell you like these things are good to just build prototypes, but not really build like full scale applications that can scale for like a lot of users, So all of those things are very overrated. What's underrated is, I think, it is still a very powerful technology, right? Like, unlike anything that we have seen before, and we should not underestimate it, I would say. So it has both the sides to it, is what I would say. It is kind of like ambiguous right now.
Does anyone else have any thoughts on either of those questions, whether it's the future of music licensing or whether they feel that there are any overrated or underrated use cases of AI right now?
I just wanted to add to that. Like when I look at it overall, and like you were just saying, man, so I feel that sometimes I try and like contextualize what's going on by reminding myself that there's always been progressions in tools that we use. Like we didn't always use a DAW. We didn't always have synthesizers. We had to create the sounds ourselves, like with actual objects. And we have to kind of remember that when we're thinking of AI and this jump that's happened in the past 3 or so years, it is a more significant jump than I'd say a lot of other advances, but it is in itself, like when you were saying, Ben, about if we tag songs with AI generated on like DSPs, or I think at some point it's going to normalize. Like a lot of the content, it's a lot easier to do a lot of things. Like you said, we can make prototypes, or like Dave said here, vibe coding, which I love doing. Um, like we can make things a lot more people can, it's more accessible to them. But then your creativity and that humane aspect is what you have to be good at to stand out. And when that happens, yeah, in that case, there's a lot of overrated tools, because then it creates ability for everybody. It's these other aspects of, marketing has become more important than it was before, because, well, everyone can make a tool now. How do you differentiate it from the others? Everyone can make certain types of music. Well, you can make background music, or you can make a certain beat more easy than you could before. What is the thing that you're going to add, like we said, that offbeat or detune that's going to differentiate it? So I feel like, yes, it's like a big step forward, but at the same time, it's going to renormalize itself when people find new ways to, stand out from the crowd.
Yeah,
I would
absolutely.
add quickly to that making and experiencing music is a physiological experience, and it's that physical part of it that I think is so often left out of the conversation right now. And anybody who's picked up an instrument, even if it's just briefly, you know that there's something that you experience that is unique in the world that can't be created or recreated in any other way. And so, well, there's a fascination right now in the world with prompt-based music generation, in the same way that there was a fascination with being able to create greeting cards and, elf videos and things like this. I think we can already feel that interest starting to wane. Our interest at Roland is how can we take the groundswell of interest that some would label the new generation of consumer creators, and begin to build bridges from music generation to music creation, so that people actually get to experience the physicality of making music. And that's what we're focused on.
Absolutely. And again, that feels like a really beautiful point to wrap things up. Guys, once again, thank you so much for giving us all your time and your insights and perspective today. Anyone who tuned in, thank you. Thank you also for giving us your time and questions. I feel like this was a really, really productive and engaging and fascinating discussion. So yeah, thank you very much. Like I say, we're going to be recording this session. And I'll be sharing the recording on our YouTube channel at some point within the next week. I'll make sure we post on LinkedIn when we've done that. I think that's everything from myself. Thank you very much, guys, once again, and hopefully see you all at the next one.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Ben and Paul and Mansoor, and everybody for joining too.
Thanks, guys.